GamingBolt presents the 15 best Xbox 360 games of all time. The Xbox 360 took the world by storm back in 2005. If you were a gamer back in the early 2000s and didn't have a PlayStation 3 console, you probably had an Xbox 360. Microsoft's almost perfect moves back then invited a lot of great developers, and in the process, a lot of franchises ditched their PlayStation exclusivity. With that out of the way, enjoy GamingBolt's picks for the 15 best Xbox 360 games of all time. Please note that due to the sheer number of games on the Xbox 360, it's impossible to make everyone happy. Know that this is our list, so there's a good chance your favorite games may not be present here. Dead Space. Dead Space puts the player on a spaceship that is infested with grotesque monsters known as necromorphs. You were sent with a team of engineers to repair the USG Ishimura, a mining ship that had sent out a distress signal. The player was put into the shoes of Isaac Clarke, an engineer for the CEC, a trade organization forefronting deep space and solar mining. The game was made to be a psychological horror shooting game, and it hit its mark fairly well. It was the kind of game you knew something was coming if it got too quiet. It didn't help that air vents were the main path for the monsters to jump out and scare the living daylights out of you. The game was critically acclaimed for its writing, polished level design, and incredible atmosphere. Limbo. The Xbox Live Arcade was something shown as early back as the first Xbox, but it was really pushed with the release of the Xbox 360 when indie developers began to really put their games on the marketplace. This led to some amazing games to be shared with the world. Limbo was a two-dimensional puzzle platformer from an indie developer known as Playdead. This was their debut game and was quite the adventure. The game showcases the story about a boy who is searching for his missing sister, all the while having to avoid traps and enemies that will kill him repeatedly. The game was praised for its puzzle design, simple controls, and death sequences. Far Cry 3. Far Cry 3 lets the player explore a tropical open world with action-packed gunfights and RPG elements like skill trees and a crafting system. The story focuses on the protagonist, Jason Brody, after he was kidnapped by a group of pirates led by one of the main antagonists, Voss. The game received widespread praise for its lengthy and satisfying story missions, impressive gunplay, and the vast open world that the player can explore. Braid. Braid was a game originally released on the Xbox Live Arcade. The game held features that made it stand out from the rest of the puzzle-based platformers out there, such as its time-warping ability that changes based on the level you are playing, or its exceptionally vague story. The only thing we know is you play as Tim, it is up to the player to rescue a princess from a monster, and that Tim has made a big mistake. The game was bombarded with praise for its elaborate puzzles, beautiful backgrounds, and stunning music. Forza Motorsport 3. There were a lot of racing games released on the Xbox 360 during its lifespan, so it was kind of hard to pick which racing game should take this spot. Our pick for this entry is Forza Motorsport 3. The game featured over 400 cars for the player to customize and more than 100 track variations to race on. The game added new gameplay elements such as assisted driving and the ability to change perspective to the first person so you can feel like you're genuinely in the front seat. It received critical acclaim and even earned the Best Driving Game in the 2009 Spike Video Game Awards and a total of 9 other awards. Fallout 3. Post-apocalyptic games were kind of a niche demographic. It wasn't as popular as other genres at the time, mostly because developers couldn't seem to do it quite right. The Fallout series, however, managed just fine. In its third main installment, Fallout 3 brought the once isometric franchise to a full 3D iteration. The game took place in a post-apocalyptic Washington, D.C., as the player takes control of a customized character who is forced to leave their safety of their home after their father suddenly leaves. This caused the player to go off searching for him. However, the story can absolutely be tossed to the side as the player explores the open world, which is filled with missions to complete, locations to discover, Easter eggs to uncover, and lore to learn. Halo 3. Who doesn't know of Halo 3 or any of its precursors? Halo 3 was a massively popular game upon its release and had a lot to offer. Whether you were playing through the story or you were competing against your friends online or locally. While the story was short, the highlight feature of the game was its multiplayer, which allowed up to 4 players to play on a single console and a grand total of 16 to play against each other online. The game was praised for its writing, new equipment and vehicles, and of course, its multiplayer. Gears of War 3. Gears of War 3 featured new elements that made it stand out from its predecessors. After the events of the second game, humanity struggled to bring itself back from near extinction. The game allowed for up to 4-player co-op online and/or 2-player split screen. They also introduced a new mode known as Beast Mode that allowed the player to control a beast fighting COG soldiers until they can evolve into a bigger, badder beast. The game was praised for its voice acting, visuals, and music, and over 3 million copies were sold in its opening week. Batman Arkham City. Superhero games are normally hit or miss, especially when it comes down to the DC Comics properties. However, the Arkham series was a hit like no other. The developers, Rocksteady Studios, decided to take what was loved about their previous Batman game and added new ideas to Arkham City. One such change was the location. No longer were you confined to a small island. Instead, you were given the opportunity to wander around a portion of Gotham City, repurposed by Hugo Strange to be a prison for dangerous criminals. You, of course, take control of the Dark Knight himself, gliding along, all the while keeping an eye out for enemies and completing daunting missions. Portal 2. The original Portal was a big deal when it first came out. However, people didn't want the series to end. Valve listened to fans' wishes and released the second game that was just as good as its precursor, perhaps even better because of the inclusion of multiplayer and a cast of intriguing characters. The single-player campaign has the player control Chell, the protagonist from the first game who was recaptured and put into stasis for a few years before being rescued by a robot named Wheatley. Meanwhile, the multiplayer story takes place after the single-player campaign. You take control of Atlas and Peabody, 2 robots that have to go through a set of puzzles together. The game was praised for its well-paced humor, voice work, and the core gameplay mechanic, puzzles. Red Dead Redemption. Have you ever wanted to be a cowboy when you were younger? If you did, then Red Dead Redemption is perfect for you. Take control of John Marston, a former outlaw with a goal to find his family and live his life, even if that means taking revenge on old friends. The game has a number of random encounters and side quests to complete as well. The game lets you steal horses, carriages, hunt, gamble, and of course, accept good old-fashioned duels in town. It was highly praised for the environment, music, and voice acting. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim was an open-world fantasy RPG complete with everything from giants to skeletons to trolls and even dragons. The game featured a large map for the player to explore, a lot of secrets to discover, various side quests to complete, random encounters to run into, and guild-based missions to accomplish. This is all tied together with beautiful surroundings and an enchanting soundtrack. The story isn't something you have to complete to enjoy. As said before, there are plenty of things to keep you busy, and that's not even mentioning the DLC that will add even more content. The game was praised for its art design, graphics, and the soundtrack that entranced many gamers with its theme song. Mass Effect 2. After the events of the first game, the player finds themselves stranded in space after an attack from a hostile ship that destroys the Normandy. You were then helped by an organization known as Cerberus. The game featured a better use of the morality system with more good and bad options that affect the end of the game, excellent cast of characters, and companion missions. It was praised for its voice acting, art design, diverse characters, and of course its storytelling. The Orange Box. The Orange Box was a bundle of 5 games which included the Half-Life games and their DLCs, Portal, and Team Fortress 2. Now, given this was 5 well-received games bundled into one box, it was bound to be praised, and it was. In fact, some even claimed that this was the pinnacle of what game bundles should be. It sold about 3 million copies by the end of November of 2008, which goes to show how gamers value products that come from Valve. Grand Theft Auto 5. Now, you knew this was coming. The GTA series always comes out on top with better and better quality, so to no one's surprise, Grand Theft Auto 5 was going to be on this list. The game kept to its violent open-world style with better multiplayer and more vehicles to obtain and annoy the pedestrians. It also added new things to keep the player busy, like more clothes, collectibles, heists, and several minigames. The game shares a story between 3 protagonists, Michael, Trevor, and Franklin, all with different personalities and story missions to complete. There's also multiplayer that is popular to this day. The game was critically acclaimed for its gameplay, multiple playable characters, open world, and its presentation. It quickly became the fastest sold entertainment product with about $800 million earned in just the first day, and in the span of 3, it breached $1 billion. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from GamingBolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.